Hello again and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. We've got another great episode for you. I will admit it's kind of a reboot. We're going back to episode 211, where I talk to our own Massad Ayoob about the legal ramifications of carrying a firearm and use of force situations. The viewers got a lot of email and comments about it, so I thought, let's go back and check it out again, because it's one of those episodes that even if you've already seen it, you watch it a second time, you're going to pick some stuff up you did in the first time. So whether you've seen it before or not, this is a great episode with Massad Ayoob. But before we get to that, first, a quick word from our great sponsor, 4Patriots. Prepare for those just-in-case situations with emergency food kits from 4Patriots. Their survival food kits combine great taste with long shelf life, making them perfect to stash away for any emergency situation. The folks at 4Patriots set up a special page just for our audience, so you can get this week's special discounts and deals. That page is 4patriots.com/gunmag. Again, just go to 4patriots.com/gunmag for all the special discounts and deals. Well, good afternoon, Massad.
Hey, Brent.
Well, it's good to talk to you and see you. We haven't been face-to-face for quite a while, and now through the miracle of the internet, we get to be face-to-face. So I appreciate you taking time to talk to us from your new studio there. I was kind of surprised when you said you've got this set up now so you can do video, which is great. So glad you could join us.
Thanks. We generally work from home and home office, but we live in the boondocks with horrible bandwidth, and Zoom was pretty much off the table. So we have an office downtown now for this sort of thing. Works better.
Excellent. Well, we will bother you much more and make more use of this, because truly you are one of those folks that are legally considered an expert. You are an expert witness in court. You've been doing that for a long time. You're one of the most well-known folks that will testify in the case of legally defensible shootings, and you're well known for that. And you do that a lot when you're not teaching shooting. So you are the guy when people ask questions. I always wish I could just forward them directly to you, because I think I know what I'm talking about, but you have actually been proven to legally know what you talk about. So the reason we're having our chat today is I've noticed in the last few months we're getting a different kind of question. You always kind of get the same question. What's the first thing I should do if I shoot somebody? And, that's pretty straightforward, but we're starting to hear different kind of things. And all I can think is, with some of the craziness going on in this country, especially with some of the more liberal prosecutors and district attorneys that are coming to the fore, especially in some of these larger cities, people are law-abiding good Americans are getting really worried that if they have to take a life or just even shoot somebody in the course of defending themselves, they're going to be brought up on charges. And, I guess the default answer, of course, is always I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. But the aftermath in the legal system can be really ugly. So anyway, we're going to talk about some of these kind of 2.0 self-defense questions that we've heard of late. But before we get in there, there's two things I got to say. Number one, nothing that I or Moss say is considered legal advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. And anything else I forgot to say there, Moss, you're more the expert on disclaimers.
Yeah, basically, we're not giving legal advice. That's for attorneys. We're giving practical advice.
There you go. There you go. Well, before we go into this other stuff, what is the most important thing or couple of things that people need to remember if they are ever forced to defend themselves with a firearm?
Well, first, let's bear in mind that most successful DGUs, defensive gun usages, nobody gets shot at all. The great majority of times, the good guy draws the gun. The bad guy realizes, oh, poo, or words to that effect. I am about to die from a sudden and acute failure of the victim selection process. And as they say in the words of the court, they abjure from the conflict. Now, the single biggest mistake I see made, something like that happens, the citizen handles the encounter itself perfectly, the bad guy goes away, and the citizen goes, phew, and holsters their gun and does not call the police. It's counterintuitive. People think bad guys don't call the police. BS. The serious offenders have been going through the revolving door of the criminal justice machine since they were juvenile offenders, and they know how it works, and they don't like losing at their own game. They're going to hide their weapon, they're going to call the police, and they're going to say, a crazy guy that looks remarkably like Brent Wheat pulled a gun on me, and I'll sign the complaint. I want that man arrested. Now, the whole criminal justice system, as you well know as a retired career cop and police supervisor, is geared on the assumption that the complainant is the victim. And there are only two roles open in the play, victim and perpetrator. Whoever calls in first has assumed the role of the victim. By default, you become the suspect. And let's say they got your license tag, the cops track it, they come to your door, say, sir, we'd like to talk to you about the incident at First and Main. You say, oh my God, this guy came up, he pulled a knife on me? Really? Yeah, I had to draw my gun and he turned and ran? Really? That's serious. And you didn't call us, you're under arrest. And it goes downhill from there. The die is cast. Your mom was right when she told you only have one chance in life to make a first impression. Now, a whole lot of the criminal defense lawyers who've spent high 90th percentile of their career trying to mitigate the guilt of actually guilty clients tend to reflexively apply the same principles to the citizen who actually did the right thing. And unfortunately now, we're in the land of what's called the affirmative defense. We're not saying we didn't do the thing we're accused of. We're saying, darn right, I did it, but I was justified in doing it. And one element of that is historically it has shifted the burden of proof. Remember, the first impression was the other guy was the victim, you were the perpetrator. And murderers, gangbangers, all the time say, I shot the other guy in self-defense, which sometimes is actually true. But basically, the typical advice of say nothing to the police tends to not be the best advice for the citizen who legitimately drew the weapon. You have responded to these scenes, Brent, officers you supervised have, and you know the drill that the public doesn't. Particularly if someone's been shot, that scene is going to be absolutely chaotic. And all the emergency services, police, fire, and EMS, emergency medical service, the highest priority is preservation of life. Preservation of evidence comes down a little bit lower. In your sister magazine, American Cop, a few years, probably a decade or so ago, one of the writers took heat for saying, how dare you insult our brother and sister emergency professionals, the EMS, when you say that they are the evidence eradication team. But the fact is, that's just how it happens. You've got people wearing heavy boots, usually, trampling the scene. They're cutting the guy's clothes off, which might compromise gunshot residue trace evidence that would confirm your story that the guy was right on top of you when you fired. Spent casings get kicked into gutters. Spent casings get picked up in tire treads. Spent casings get picked up in boot treads or just kicked around. And you and I know that the location of the spent casing doesn't conclusively pinpoint the position of the gun on the shooter. But a whole lot of people don't realize that. We've had cases, the famous FBI incident in April 11, 1986. Nobody knows exactly how many shots were fired in that long, complicated gunfight. Because for one thing, when they medevaced a couple of the badly wounded FBI agents, what do you think prop wash from a helicopter does to spent grass on pavement? There were also reports of witnesses picking up shell casings as souvenirs from the big gunfight. So one of the first things that you want to do is point out the evidence. I give my students basically a 5-point checklist. First, establish the active dynamic of what has happened. The active dynamic is not that you shot him. The active dynamic is what he did that forced you to shoot. That man tried to rob me at knife point. That man tried to rape me, whatever it was. Second, indicate future cooperation. That you'll sign, I'd say something like, I'll be happy to sign a statement later. Assuming the guy's still alive, I'll be happy to testify against him in court. Things of that nature. Reinforce who's the victim here and who's the perpetrator. Because the problem is, the guy laying in the puddle of blood was the perpetrator, but he looks a whole lot like a victim now. you reverse roles on
Yep.
it. You were the intended victim, but you're the guy with the smoking gun. You look a whole lot like the perpetrator, and we have to overcome that as soon as is humanly possible. Point out the evidence before it disappears. Fourth, point out witnesses before they disappear. Okay, since 1963-64, the tragedy of Kitty Genovese in New York City, there's been a mentality in urban NME that says, I don't want to get involved. And the witnesses whose testimony could have proven your innocence disappear and are never found. At that point, at that fifth point, is when I would respectfully stop answering questions and request legal counsel, which, by the way, you do have to do now under a Supreme Court decision. I'd say something to the effect of, officer, detective, you'll have my full cooperation after I've spoken with counsel, and I'd like to contact legal representative. And basically,
great
that's
advice.
it. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, defense lawyers tell you never talk to the police." Law professor James Duane, in his famous lecture, "Don't Talk to the Police," spends like 45 minutes telling you about all these guys who talked to the cops and got hung by their own tongue. If you actually listen to his lecture and take notes, all but one of them were pretty much good for it. They were guilty. And as you well know, if you're guilty, there's not a whole lot you can say to the police that's going to help you, unless you've got somebody even guiltier you could offer to trade for them to go easier on you. And your defense lawyer spends a whole lot more time doing those deals with the prosecutor than you do, so you're a whole lot better off to let them broker the deal. But if you are the person who did the right thing, say so. The public, the jury pool expects the person who did the right thing to say that they did the right thing. What you don't want to do is go into details. We know that in fight or flight reflex, perceptions are altered. When tunnel vision kicks in, it creates the literal illusion that the man and his weapon are closer to you and larger than they actually are. So somebody says, how far away was he when you fired? They say, 3 feet. So the surveillance camera shows it was 3 yards. To people who've never been in a fight for their life, it looks like you're a liar. So if they ask me that, I'd say, sir, he was close enough to kill me. That's why I shot him in self-defense. But really, any of those detailed questions should wait till an absolute minimum of 24 hours after the incident. Many experts now recommend 72 hours. Professor Lewinsky at Force Science Institute recommends a minimum of 1 full sleep cycle to allow the individual who's been in that situation and has those distorted perceptions to get their head together, and when their heart's no longer pounding and the adrenaline's no longer racing, to put together, okay, here's what happened. Another problem with giving detailed answers to questions immediately afterwards is those questions are going to be asked in the order that they occurred to the lead investigator, or even the first officer on the scene, who does have, as you know, some responsibility to gather intelligence and find out what happened. They'll ask the questions in the order in which they occur to the questioner, which may be completely different from the order in which things happened. But now, particularly today, it's very likely that an interview will be on body cam. It's going to sound later in court as if you changed your story about what the sequence of events was. So there are lots of reasons you don't want to go into detail at the scene. If you are arrested, because remember, the cops can't see that halo over your head, they don't know who you are yet, don't become indignant, don't become combative, don't do anything that would let anyone testify to a jury later that you are hostile, you are aggressive, you are combative. It feeds into the false narrative that you are the bad guy, not the good guy.
That's absolutely true. And, speaking, both of us can speak from experience. We've been on scenes where you take the evidence into consideration, you take into what people are saying, and you're going, I think that guy is the good guy, but boy, what a jerk. You're not winning friends and influencing people, by antagonizing folks. So that's all great advice and a great refresher if you've already had it, and words to live by if you haven't. But now that we've kind of established a baseline, I wanted to get into this kind of 2.0. This is a thinking person's occupation. So these are some questions that I'm sure more than just one person had. So I'm going to read a few of these off, and we'll kind of talk about them. And again, these are hypotheticals, and I doubt if you've run across them. Maybe you have, but I would be definitely interested in hearing your opinion. And the first one, and I've heard this quite a bit. Well, if you're using hollow points, does that show some kind of savage intent on your part that you're really wanting to maim and wound and murder people by using those hollow points? And you know, to a person that's got any kind of training in shooting, like, no, because that's what they do best. But people are asking this. So would you foresee a situation where somebody could actually get behind the 8-ball because they chose hollow points over a far less effective full metal jacket?
Well, it is very, very common. You don't see it in police cases anymore. And the reason is the expanding bullets are virtually 100% standard issue now for American police service handguns. This whole thing with the hollow point dum-dum bullets being indicia of malice, which I still have trouble saying with a straight face, as you can see. We regular English-speaking folks say, why don't they say indication of malice? Because attorneys never speak English when they can speak Latin, apparently. It actually goes back about 50 years. There was a movement in the mid-1970s that began in an article in the progressive magazine The Nation titled The Vietnamization of Main Street. And the whole thing was about demonizing the hollow point bullets that at that time American police were just starting to go to get the standard 38 special up off its knees for stopping power. And the article had phrases that we are seeing to this day in courts. Bullets shaped like the nacelles of jet engines, you know, and you can kind of hear the B-52s warming up in the background for a nuclear strike. The bullets mushroom, and you picture the nuclear cloud over Hiroshima. One phrase in there that we keep hearing is, the bullets don't explode, you do. And let them bring that up. Historically, every single time it's come up in one of my cases, we have been able to shoot it down. And we show the jury the 4 very good reasons why police have gone to the hollow points and similar expanding bullets, and why we strongly recommend the same for the responsible armed citizen. In no particular order, reduced likelihood of ricochet that can strike a bystander. A ball round is typically round nose, and in the auto pistols most people carry today has a hard full metal jacket on it. If it strikes a hard surface on almost any angle of obliquity, it can ricochet and go off on an unpredictable trajectory. The jacketed hollow point, that hollow cavity there, tends to have a cookie cutter effect. You need a real steep angle of obliquity for it to ricochet. Normally, it'll bite into whatever it hit and either bury itself there or shatter or tumble and very quickly decelerate and lose its power to wound. It reduces overpenetration. And there are some people on the gun forums that don't understand how important that is. There's no backstop in a gunfight except the body of the offender. As callous as that may sound, it's the reality we have to deal with. And it appalls me that people who would never go on one of the old, indoor shooting ranges that was built in 1950, and there's a big sign that says, don't shoot anything bigger than 22 rimfire, it'll penetrate the backstop. None of those people would load up a magazine of armor piercing and shoot it at that backstop. Yet the same person carries ball ammunition on the street. Now, the studies going back to the late Dr. Martin Fackler, 9mm ball, 40 S&W full metal jacket, 45 hard, will go more than 2 feet through solid muscle tissue simulating Fackler formula, IWBA formula, International Wound Ballistics Association formula, ballistic jello. Fackler had in his office a diagram of 3 people standing in a row, and that 45 bullet goes through and through the first one, through and through the chest of the second one behind him, and buries itself in the chest of the third. And it would literally approach negligence to be carrying that stuff on the street if you had any other option. New York City Police Department was probably the last big department to go from ball ammunition to hollow points in 1999, Brent. And they did it only after the New York Times did a Freedom of Information Act thing, and they found 17 innocent people, including brother and sister officers, who had been hit by those Full Metal Jacket 9mm bullets they were issuing after the bullet went through and through the intended perpetrator. The hollow point with that evil mushroom effect can also be seen as a parachute effect. As the bullet widens and meets more resistance, it slows down, and it's much more likely to remain in the body of the offender. There's no 100% guarantee, but vastly more likely. That's why FBI's protocols, which emphasize tactical penetration, insist that the bullet not go more than 18 inches through the IWBA calibrated gelatin. Third, historically, and you know this well after a long career in American law enforcement, the hollow point bullet stopped violent encounters faster, assuming equal shot placement. You can remember the time I came on in the early 70s. You came on not too long after that. Departments like NYPD, LAPD, where they had round-nose-led 38 Special Standard Edition. The first thing a field training officer would tell you on your first night on patrol is, kid, no matter what they told you at the academy, if you've got to shoot somebody to stop him from killing you or me or one of the citizens we just to protect, you better feed him all 6 quick, because that's what it's going to take to stop him. We found the hollow points simply work vastly better. Now, it sounds like, ooh, so the other side will say, ooh, so they kill more efficiently, more indicia of malice. No, what allows the cop or the citizen to shoot another human being? That person is doing something so horrible that society condones his death if necessary to make him stop pulling his trigger, to make him stop swinging that knife at innocent victims. And that which stops them faster better serves all the better angels, if you will, of society. And I think all 3 of those are incontrovertible. We can show those to be true to the standard that the court demands of expert witnesses, a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. The 4th point is somewhat debatable, but I think the weight of the debate falls on our side. And that 4th point with the hollow points, the expanding bullets, is it is arguably actually less lethal for the person who forced you to shoot him. Now, how could that be if it's supposed to cause more tissue damage? Well, let's go back in history. We can bring in the experts who were on the job back in the day when everybody was having to shoot them multiple times with 38 round nose or Full Metal Jacket ball to make them stop doing what they were doing. Well, you shoot them 6 times. That's 6 open holes of entry in the chest, 6 open holes of exits out the back. As Elmer Keith used to say, air rushing in and blood rushing out. So we've got tension pneumothorax, hemothorax, in addition to all the organ and blood vessel damage. And you could do that to the guy in the operating theater at Mount Sinai Hospital in front of the surgeons, and they probably couldn't save him. You hit him once with a good hollow point. If it missed the aorta, if it missed the heart, if it missed the spinal cord, but it put him down on that first shot. With today's medical care and the excellent first aid training for gunshot wounds that's given now to virtually every American cop in the emergency medical service, that guy with that single gunshot wound to the chest has a very high likelihood of survival. But it's counterintuitive, so that's going to have to be explained. And what I recommend to the attorneys, if that issue comes up, is to bring in an experienced trauma surgeon who's treated a lot of gunshot wounds and give them those 2 hypotheticals. Okay, he's hit with the supposedly humane Geneva Convention 9mm 6 times through the thorax with entry and exit, all perforating wounds. 20 minutes to emergency surgery. Doctor, your prognosis for survival is going to be extremely poor. Doctor, he's hit once in the chest. It has not hit the great vessels. He is given routine first aid treatment and the same 20-minute window to emergency surgery, his prognosis for survival. Excellent. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. So throw me in that briar patch, Brer Fox, because we can defend that. And, everybody's worried about these things with, the hollow points, or you had too much training or something like that. Let them bring it up. We'll shoot it down. Now, it looks to the left. Well,
You read my mind right there. That was going to be the next question, and it was actually a yin and yang question. I've had questions: is no training whatsoever for non-law enforcement, is that a bad thing? I've actually had people start asking. I've been to every class at Gunsight, including a couple they don't even offer, and I train every weekend and I compete. Is that going to show that I'm just waiting for the chance to shoot somebody? So,
au contraire, the other side will make that argument. We've all got to remember they learned sometime in law school, probably their first semester. If the law is on your side, pound on the law. If the facts are on your side, pound on the facts. And if neither the law nor the facts are on your side, pound on the table and pound on every witness the other side puts up. Well, if the law and the facts...
I've had attorneys tell me that.
Yeah. And if the law and the facts weren't on your side, you wouldn't have shot him in the first place, right? So we pretty much can't analyze the assault. If you have the Soros prosecutor or simply the clueless prosecutor, because they don't teach this stuff in law school, who is charging you, and they say, okay, he went and got firearms training. Well, nobody in my circle went and got firearms training. He must have been hungry to kill, blah, blah, blah. Throw me in that briar patch, Brer Fox, because we can navigate it a whole lot better than that kind of accusing attorney can. I would recommend to defense counsel that they bring in as an expert witness Carl Wren. For our listeners who aren't familiar, Carl with a K, Wren, R-E-H-N, krtraining.com in Texas. Carl is one of our best trainers in the private sector today, and he was the guy who did the study with Texas DPS, the Department of Public Safety, the issuing authority for concealed carry permit holders in Texas, who determined that out of every 100 concealed carry licensed people in Texas, only 1 out of 100 ever went beyond the state-mandated minimum training. So you are the 1%. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they're going to try to tell you because my client took this training, he was somehow hungry to kill. Yet you will learn he's part of only 1% of people entrusted with the responsibility of carrying a loaded gun among all of us, who took that responsibility so seriously. He took time out of his life, away from his family, money out of his own pocket, to train with the kind of people who train the police instructors to make sure he would never make a mistake and abuse that power with which he'd been entrusted. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you know that anyone who lies to you about one thing is lying to you about the rest. And that leads us to why I say throw me in the briar patch. When the other side brings up some BS point like killer dum-dum bullets or if he got training, he must be hungry to commit murder, and we shoot it down, it looks to the layman like pawn takes pawn at the beginning of a chess game. He made a point, now you made a point, so you even. Hell no, because every time we show them the other side is lying about something, we kick their credibility right in the you-know-what. And the jury knows whoever lies to them about one thing is lying about the rest, probably lying about the rest. The ancient Greeks and Romans knew it. They called it falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. False in one thing, false in all things. When they pull that crap on you in court, people do not despair, rejoice. If your defense team knows how to fight, they've just given you an avenue to victory.
Now, a question that comes up along with training, and I actually wonder this too, with law enforcement and military, we have to periodically qualify. When law enforcement, generally about every month or 6 months tops. I personally have to go tomorrow as a retiree and qualify, and I'm getting psyched up for that. Is it becoming more important for citizens to have some kind of graded scoring on record, a qualification, if you will? Or have we not necessarily gotten to that point yet? I
recommend to my students that they do. When you compete in a match, basically they'll post the scores afterwards. Archive those and keep them. You'll be able to show that you went to these competitions not to practice killing people, but to essentially test your skills against the best competitors around, and to hone your skills, because every hit is the opposite of a miss that could have endangered the public. Now, if you don't have time or budget to compete, all of you, probably everyone watching this owns a smartphone that they can record on. Go online, find out what's the standard or one of the standard police qualification courses in your state. Turn on the camcorder, set it up so at an angle where it can see both you and the target. Shoot the qual, and be able to show, sir, when they say, who is this ordinary person to walk around among us carrying a gun like a trained policeman? Now your attorney can say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we will show you evidence that he qualified to a prevailing police standard, the same as the police officers and the bailiff who are guarding us in this room. I call it Ayoob's Law number 1, be able to predict where the attack will come. Have the counterattack already in place and poised for launch. Because when it happens, you ain't going to have time to figure it out. You've got to have it down to stimulus response. And if you think about it, it's probably one of the first rules of human conflict, whether the arena is the courtroom, the battlefield, a dark alley, or a debate society.
But I do have one direction I want to go, and this is something that I will say I've had personal experience with, and I'm sure you have too. Over the years, as a supervisor of police officers, toward the end of my career, it became very important. You'd see guys wearing the T-shirts in the gym, kill them all, let God sort them out. And now, with social media, posting things that, my test always as a supervisor was you set somebody down and go, at what point did that seem like it was a really good idea? And I'm sure you've run across clients now that are suddenly being crucified because of the things they've said or watched or liked. Talk a little bit about how you live your life and how you project your life to the greater world through social media and the internet, things like that.
When you stand in court, people, your life becomes an open book. The other side is going to be investigating all of your social media stuff. It's real easy now, almost any kind of a case, excuse me, to get the judge to sign a warrant to seize all the computer devices you have access to. And they're going to be looking for what kind of forums do you read, what kind of forums do you post on. Did somebody say, kill them all and let God sort them out? You posted like, or anything like that. And they will absolutely attempt to use that as a state of mind issue. But a part of the prosecutorial burden is an element called mens rea. From the Latin, it means literally the guilty mind. They have to show that you either acted with an intent to commit a crime, hopefully the crime in question, or that you were so negligent that your negligence rose to a culpable standard, that is, a guilt-producing standard. State of mind issues like saying, boy, if somebody did that to me, I'd blow their brains out. Boy, I hope somebody tries that with me. That kind of stuff can hurt you really badly. We saw it in this past year in the Austin, Texas case of the Uber driver who shot and killed the man at the Antifa protest, who had an AK-47 inches from him. You couldn't see it on the poor camcorder evidence, but the defendant claimed he was starting to raise that AK, and the defendant was a career soldier moonlighting as an Uber driver. He was familiar with an AK and what it could do, and that it could shoot through that door like a piece of cheese, and he shot and killed the man. One of the things that really hung him in court was he had done social media stuff whenever there was, a riot or a protest blocking people in traffic, saying, boy, if they did that to me, I'd... And ironically, the man that he killed had said some truly horrible things on his social media that were not allowed to commit. Bear in mind that prior bad acts by your opponent, if they were not known to you, that's Federal Rule of Evidence 404B, if they were not known to you, cannot be used in your defense for harming him because they were not formative to your decision and your action for which you're now being judged. So plaintiff's counsel and the prosecutorial bar, social media has become their best friend. Lose that bloodthirsty crap. Do not be wearing the T-shirt that says "Kill a commie for mommy." But my pet dog, I've got a rescue dog here that's vying for my attention. My favorite dog over the years was a humongous Great Dane. And I had a whole lot of friends and students would give me these T-shirts and signs that said, "Never mind the dog, beware the owner." And I gave them away to people who owned like Chihuahuas and stuff. I'm going to advertise I'm more dangerous than a potentially vicious dog. I mean, what are people thinking with that stuff? I would not even put gun stickers of any kind on my automobile. The reason being, first, it's a magnet for vandalism by people who hate gun owners. But second, if you've got Mickey the Mope out there who's looking to steal guns, it's common knowledge that a bumper sticker means the person driving this car cares strongly about whatever it says in this bumper sticker. And they see, protected by Smith & Wesson or the Glock logo in your back window. They figure, they look around, no witnesses, that might be a nice gun in here for me to steal, and I know how to shatter that window and get in that car. And the ones who can delay their gratification will figure, well, if he's so into guns that he's got gun stickers all over his car, I bet he's got a bunch of them. And if I just fall back and discreetly follow this car to where it lives, I'll know where the mother lode is, and I'll go there. And maybe your mom or your spouse is going to be alone at home when they come. So my recommendation is no, I'll wear a gun logo thing at a shooting match or a shooting class or something. There's nothing on my vehicle that's going to indicate firearms. And please, no shirts that indicate bloodthirsty stuff. The Punisher skulls on the grips. Okay, the Punisher was a Marvel character who was a literal vigilante who hunted down and killed people as judge, jury, and executioner that he thought were bad guys. You saw a decade ago in the Zimmerman case, just a couple of years ago, the Rittenhouse case, the other side calling you a vigilante for protecting yourself on the street. And you're going to have the very symbol of the vigilante, the Punisher skull, on your pistol? Good Lord. So I totally agree with you on that, Brett. You're on the right track.
So you don't have one of those signs at the front door, trespassers will be shot, survivors will be shot again. That's just asking for prosecution in my book.
That's the Plaintiff's Counsel's Guaranteed Employment Act.
Yeah. I think that's the one where the defense attorney looks at kind of everything and goes, maybe we need to arrange a plea bargain on this one.
Yeah.
So, well, to wrap this whole thing up, we've talked about maybe some scenarios people hopefully hadn't thought about, and you've informed them. But let's put this whole thing in perspective. Where do we stand today? Is it worse today than, say, 5 years ago? You've pointed out a couple of situations which look to me like travesties almost, but yet the shooter, we'll say, the good guy, hopefully, did everything in their power to screw themselves over. Maybe we just see that more because of the media, or is there really, in your opinion, a concerted effort to jam up people that use firearms lawfully? There
is a concerted effort. The so-called Soros prosecutors, George Soros, the billionaire, progressive, has if you're listening to this on audio, those are air quotes, has a history of spending enormous amounts of cash to get people elected as lead prosecutor, district attorney, or state's attorney, whatever, Commonwealth attorney, whatever it might be in your state, who will follow his particular guidelines. He seems to be very anti-police, very anti-armed citizen, and honestly, almost pro-criminal. We're seeing in Chicago, for example, and indeed the entire state of Illinois with the recent law passed there, criminals allowed to walk on the street with no bail required, after horrendous crimes that, in the past would have got them locked up with no bail or insurmountable bail. At the same time, we're seeing show trials of cops who used force reasonably, but the media spins it in such a way that, no, it's a brutal killer cop or, brutal officer brutality and all that, police brutality. And basically what you have, the prosecutor's office has a whole lot more money than you do. And it's real easy for them to browbeat somebody into a plea bargain. Or, you know, if it's one reason I belong to the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. I've been on their advisory board since their beginning now. I saw so many people bankrupted by the legal fees, Brent, after a clear-cut justifiable shooting that basically became a political football. A big part of it was, you know, just like you at the police academy were told, we don't discuss our cases in the press, it'll all come out in court, right? And the attorneys were taught the same thing in law school. Unfortunately, that treaty only works when both sides abide by it. And we started seeing classically back with the Zimmerman case in 2012, when the other side literally hires PR people to create this whole trope of, the guy who got shot was an innocent child skipping down the street, the bloodthirsty racist killed him. It so outrages the public that there are, literally riots. Well, the people on the jury figure there was a riot after this guy shot the guy. If we don't convict him, there's going to be another riot, and it'll be our fault. And that gives them a great deal of impetus to find for guilt. And I applaud both the Zimmerman jury and the Rittenhouse jury for not doing so. Now, having said that, you're going to get people commenting, oh my God, you people are nuts. Zimmerman was a murderer, Rittenhouse was a murderer, blah, blah, blah. Because it's human nature, once they've formed an opinion based on hearing only one side of the case, unfortunately, that when someone tells them otherwise, they almost take it as a personal insult. But anyone who watched the Zimmerman trial and is familiar with the evidence, anyone who watched the Rittenhouse trial and is familiar with the evidence, knows that those were justified homicides. The hard evidence proved it. But you saw the ordeals those men went through. I happen to know George Zimmerman. I was retained originally right after the shooting by his first attorney, Craig Sonner. When Sonner left the case, and they brought in Mark O'Mara and Don West, I was interviewed for that, but didn't offer to do it for free. Someone else did. They got the job. And by the way, that expert did a great job in the Zimmerman case. Don't get me wrong. But later I got to know Zimmerman, and he's not the idiot he was painted to be. He's actually a pretty sharp young man. But he now has to live under an assumed name. They made him the most hated man in America. And we've seen something somewhat similar with young Rittenhouse in the more recent incident. Now, those cases were enormously expensive. It was a seven-figure legal bill on both of them that neither man, of course, could afford to pay. Excuse me. The attorney, I took a class from Mark Richards and his colleague, Attorney Chirafisi, who did, I thought, an excellent job in the defense of Kyle Rittenhouse. And they told me it cost over $1 million. But that came out of donations from people like your viewers who saw the reality, saw that thing unfold before them on the video, and knew self-defense shooting when they saw it. And let me now publicly thank all those people whose donations made that kid's acquittal possible. But basically, if you have someone who can back you up, whether it's Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network or one of the other providers, I've seen so many people bankrupted by the legal fees. I've seen parents who had paid off their homes and were going to die in those homes that they owned free and clear and will them to their children, have to reverse mortgage them to pay their sons or their daughters' legal fees. So I think it's a good time for us to have a little bit of backup. I think also it's time for the paradigm to change. What happens in things like the Kenosha shooting, the Blake shooting that had triggered the riots and Rittenhouse's presence in Kenosha in that case, it was clear from the evidence from the very beginning. The newspaper should have been knife-armed kidnapper shot down by police in self-defense. Instead, the other side came up with this utterly bogus thing of the unarmed man. For God's sake, you can look at the video. The guy's holding a knife in his left hand the entire time. And the city burned over there. The Kenosha Police Department was silent. Now, going back to LAPD, back when Tom Beck was chief of police there, he changed the paradigm of we'll only discuss it in the press, or we'll only discuss it in court. He developed the policy that LAPD has now. Any potentially controversial use of serious force, they call the press conference. They play the 911 call that came in from the public, redacted so no one's name or particular address is publicized. Here's the body cam. Here's all the evidence. The investigation continues. We'll keep you apprised. And in Los Angeles, the city that burned in the 1990s in the Rodney King riots, none of those LAPD incidents has caused a major civil disturbance. The only disturbances they've had were when, after the George Floyd thing, the embers of that conflagration flew all over the country and landed in cities everywhere. So I think that's the paradigm for the future. Have an attorney who, when you are being accused in the court of public opinion, will stand up and speak for you. The public thinks silence in the face of accusation is an admission of guilt.
Absolutely. Well, great words and very thoughtful words that are backed up by a lot of experience. You've been part of some pretty high-profile defenses of legal use, and you've seen it all. So right now, before we go, though, anything you're working on you want to point out, Moss?
Well, I still teach full-time, primarily armed citizen use of deadly force. Go to MassadAyoobGroup.com. We've probably got a class somewhere within striking distance of you. My book, Deadly Force, updated edition, came out last year, and my first audiobook, Deadly Force. So we were talking earlier about having a good voice for radio, and also, in my case, having a good face for radio. We'll see how that works.
Yeah.
And of course, great. I'm one of your regulars in Guns Magazine.
Yes, I was going to wrap up with that. You're in Guns Magazine every month, along with American Handgunner every 2 months, and that's because they only come out every 2 months. So lots of good stuff there, and make sure you check him out, all those different places. And I have not yet taken a class from Moss. I've audited one of his classes, and we're going to make that happen in 2024.
I am doing one in Indiana in your very backyard, and you should be there.
I will make plans too. Well, Massad Ayoob, I appreciate everything you've said. This has been a very fascinating and interesting podcast episode, and I appreciate you taking the time out to talk with us here on the Guns Magazine podcast.
Thank you, brother. Always a pleasure. My wife and I follow all your podcasts.
Well, it was great talking to Massad Ayoob. He is such an incredible source of information. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. Before we go, I'd like to remind you to check out our great sponsor, 4 Patriots, for all your preparedness needs and supplies. If you go to their website, which is the number 4, the word patriots.com, and go to /gunmag, you can see all the great deals exclusively for the Guns Magazine podcast audience. Easy for me to say. That's 4patriots.com /gunmag. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of all of my friends and co-workers here at FMG Publications and Guns Magazine, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Weed, reminding you, now get out there and get shooting.